please give him a very warm welcome, Mr. Eddie the Eagle Edwards.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Michael, but you might know me as Eddie, Eddie the Eagle, and I've come along this evening to talk to you a little bit about my life as Great Britain's first and last Olympic ski jumper. Yes, we didn't have one in 1928 apparently, so I am the first and last Olympic ski jumper. And yes, it was Calgary, 1988, and I can't believe that it's been 36 years. 36 years since I plummeted off the end of that ski jump at the Calgary Winter Olympics. And looking around the room, I can see that all of you weren't born 36 years ago. So before I start, I've got a short little video that I'd like to show you, quite a funny video, but it takes you back 36 years, not only to those Olympic Games, but some of the things that I was doing around that time. And then I'll come back and tell you just a snippet about my life as Britain's first and last Olympic ski jumper. Let's take a look.
We are in Thunder Bay, Ontario, and we begin now with a brief lesson in history. Can you name 3 sensations we've imported from Great Britain?
John, Paul, George, and Ringo.
I don't know what Beatles means.
Just means us.
There was Twiggy, who proved that Thin was in, and Chuck and Di, where would People magazine be without them? And now you can add one more to your list. He's Eddie the Eagle Edwards.
The first thing you have to understand about ski jumping is that most normal people don't do it. That wasn't the sound of a jet flying overhead. That's the noise these guys make flying off the 90-meter ramp. Into this world of unlikely human flight has come an unlikely hero. Eddie the Eagle Edwards, a little guy with Coke bottle glasses, out to prove that a construction worker from the English Midlands can fly too. Eddie the Eagle, a true Olympian. Eddie has become the toast of Calgary.
I mean, I've been fighting to get to the Olympics for 11 years, and I finally did it.
An English plasterer from the town of Cheltenham, not a place where Olympic ski jumping dreams are normally born. Eddie's notoriety has made the people of his hometown a little curious about ski jumping.
Eddie Edwards, the ski jumper who's become a cult hero.
We went to the top of Cheltenham's tallest office block. The one, believe it or not, with the eagle outside. This is a 90-meter drop. With Eddie's eyesight, it'll look like this.
It's not that Eddie takes the dangers of ski jumping lightly.
It's always on your mind that your next jump could be your last. The fear's always there. You can't get rid of it. But it's just, it turns into a sort of a respect for the hill.
Okay, would you welcome Eddie the Eagle Edwards?
Now, that's a very dangerous sport. How many jumpers were there from all the countries that participated?
58 in the Olympics. And
you came
normally in the World Cup we have around 100 to 130.
And you came in
58th.
58.
I was 58th. Okay? 58.
58. Well, come on now.
Thank you. It sounds better.
It sounds better. Sounds a lot better than saying you were last. Well, any of us who just looking down that ski jump just admire anybody who would even think of heading down there. Tell you what, we just have to pause for a second here to do a commercial, but we're going to come right back. Stay where you are.
Buy and register any Ford Orion before June the 30th, including the new fuel-injected GLS. And as long as you haven't been disqualified from driving in the last 5 years, we'll provide 1 year's insurance free, no matter how high your premiums are. It'll even count towards your no-claims bonus. That is, if you've still got one, Mr. Edwards.
Everybody's kidding you about coming in 58th, but you broke the existing British record for the ski jump, didn't you?
I'm a 90, yep, my first jump, the old record was 68.5 meters, and on my first jump I jumped 71, which was a new British record, and I'm pleased about that.
Do you know who held the old one?
I did.
Well, you held the old one too? and I... Well, how are you? Good. Would you do something like that? You're an athlete. You played football. Would you get up on top of a 70-meter ski jump and do that?
Are you out of your mind?
Yes, I think so.
Not a chance. Just looking down that thing. I mean, it takes such courage just to stand up there. And go down that thing. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I think you look like an athlete.
Do you really?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I think you look like a movie star.
Thank you.
Eddie's known to take a few risks, but not when buying spectacles. He knows a lot of opticians charge extra for lenses because they show frame prices only. But not at Specsavers Opticians. All their frames are priced including lenses, whatever your prescription needs. From only $39.95 with a majority under £60, the price you see is the price you pay. Specsavers, the complete price optician with no hidden extras.
Eagle, you're looking great. Coming up 9 minutes. Go for landing, over. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Big shadow. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
One small jump for mankind. One very small jump.
Thank you, thank you. Believe it or not, I still drive that Ford Orion. It's a classic car, that Ford Orion. And that Specsavers commercial, that was their very first national commercial. Specsavers, and I love the Specsavers commercials they've done, especially over the last 5 or 10 years. But Specsavers got in touch with me back in the early 1990s. They invited me to Guernsey, where their head office is. And I spent the whole day in Guernsey filming that commercial. So I was the star of their very first national commercial. And that TV show was the Johnny Carson Show. Now, back in the 1970s and 1980s, that was the biggest show in America. And I filmed that show during the Olympic Games in Calgary. There was a 4-day window between doing the big hill, the big ski jump at Calgary, and the closing ceremonies. And I got a phone call from Johnny Carson, and he invited me down to LA to do the Johnny Carson Show with the great Burt Reynolds. So it was amazing meeting this wonderful movie star, Burt Reynolds, and he was such a lovely guy back then. He was lovely. So that explains my video. Now, when I talk about my life, or should I say episodes in my life, I talk about them by way of what I would call how did I get here moments. And you know, they're moments that everybody has. I expect everybody here has had a how did I get here moment. They can happen at any time. They can happen at work with colleagues. They can happen with the family at home, or they can happen when you're doing sport. And something happens that causes you to pause for a minute and think to yourself, how on earth did I get here? How on earth did I get into this situation? And of course, we had COVID not so long ago, 2 or 3 years ago. Now, who would have thought we would then spend the next 2 years in and out of lockdown, not being able to do normal things like see family and friends? And I know people dealt with that COVID situation in lots of different ways, good and bad. But for me personally, that COVID situation pales by comparison to some of the moments that I've had in my life. For instance, the biggest how did I get here moment that I can remember was when I accidentally became a pop star in Finland. Yes. Now, in Finland, ski jumping is a religion. Everybody ski jumps. Every school has a ski jump. So everybody gets the opportunity to go ski jumping. But also in Finland, there was a guy called Irving Goodman. And he was one of Finland's biggest singer and songwriters. And because I became Eddie the Eagle at the Calgary Winter Olympics, this Irving Goodman wrote a song about me. And one of the national newspapers in Finland said, why don't you get Eddie over and sing the song together as a duet? And then do a few gigs around Finland. And this Irving Goodman, he loved the idea. So he got in touch with me and my manager at the time. Now, I have had a bit of experience with singing, because when I came back from Calgary in 1988, literally the very next day, I was taken into a recording studio where I sang a song called Fly Eddie Fly. Now, I don't know if you remember Fly Eddie Fly, but it reached number 50 in the British charts. Bit of a hit. So I was quite keen to go to Finland and meet this Irving Goodman and sing the song with him. So on January the 19th, 1991, I flew to a place called Tampere in Finland. And I flew in, I went to my hotel, and I was in my hotel room for literally 2 minutes. And there was a phone call from the recording studio. They said, Irving Goodman has just died of a heart attack. He must have been so excited, bless him. He died that very morning. And I thought, well, that's it. I thought, I'm going to go back to the airport, get a flight to London and go home. But the recording studio, they said, no. We want you to come in and we want you to sing the 2 songs, because there was an A-side and a B-side, and we'll release them as your songs, but also as a tribute to Irving Goodman, because these were the last 2 songs he ever wrote. And I thought, well, what can I do? I thought, out of politeness alone, I'll just go in and see what I can do. So I went into the recording studio and I sang the 2 songs and they released them, and they reached number 2 in the charts. So in Finland, I'm a pop star. But the unusual thing was, I sang these 2 songs around Finland for 6 months. I sang them in pubs and clubs. I sang them in music festivals like Glastonbury in front of 70,000 people. And I even sang them on live Finnish television in front of 8 million viewers. And during those 6 months, and even to this very day, I do not know what I'm singing. It was all in Finnish. And I don't speak Finnish. And together with the producer of the song, we managed to write the lyrics down phonetically, and I managed to sing the song. And people in Finland can understand me when I sing the song, but nobody gave me the translation, so I have no idea what I'm singing. But the main song, the A-side, went something like, Moni on etu, mäki kotka englanen, esemina mitan, vaikka onkin viimeisin. All together, hubba et hubba. So that was quite a glamorous how did I get here moment. Now, some of my how did I get here moments weren't quite so glamorous as singing a song in Finland. In fact, 1 or 2 were quite embarrassing. And I remember one particularly embarrassing time. It involved Clovelly in Devon, which you probably know is a very ancient coastal town on the northwest coast of Devon. And the council there wanted me to open their brand new tourist information centre in Clovelly. And what they wanted me to do was drive to Swansea in South Wales, drive to the airport there, which was and still is a very small airport. And they wanted me to then put on an eagle outfit, get into a helicopter, and then we would fly over the Severn Estuary. We would swoop and land in the car park, and I would jump out in this eagle outfit and declare this new tourist information centre open. And I thought, wow, because I love doing things like that. So I drove in my Ford Orion to Swansea, to Swansea Airport. I met a very nice young lady from the PR company, and she said, Eddie, I'm ever so sorry, but we couldn't find an eagle outfit. But could you put this on? So I put the outfit on. I got into the helicopter. We flew over the Severn Estuary. We swooped and we landed. And I jumped out dressed as a chicken. I was so embarrassed. I just clucked my way around the car park. And I thought, just think of the money. Just think of the money. And I swore after that I would never, ever dress up, ever again. But then you get these how did I get here moments where you wish you could stay in the moment forever. And of course, for me, that moment, my moment, was Calgary, sitting on the bench at the top of that jump, just like you saw in the video. And there was 82,000 people in the stadium, and they were all shouting, Eddie, Eddie. And it was such a special moment that even though it happened over 36 years ago, I can remember it like it was yesterday. And every time I think about it, it still makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand out on end, because it was such a special moment. And of course, it was at Calgary that I got christened Eddie the Eagle. Now, I didn't give myself the name Eddie the Eagle. I'm not that bright. I'm a plasterer from Cheltenham. The name Eddie the Eagle was given to me by a group of supporters from an oil company in Calgary. Now, my real name is Michael Edwards, and I was born and raised in Cheltenham in Gloucestershire. But when I went to infant school, my friends started calling me Ed because of Edwards. And then Ed went to Eddie, so Eddie became a nickname. And everybody called me Eddie. So when I started skiing, I used Eddie Edwards rather than Michael Edwards. So then 2 weeks before those Olympic Games in Calgary, I was asked to do an interview with the BBC television 9 o'clock news. A big interview. And on this interview, I said, I am Eddie Edwards, and I'm about to be Britain's first ever Olympic ski jumper. I also said to all you people out there who I asked for sponsorship, but you didn't give it to me, I said, I got there without your help. Now, I thought they might have edited the interview, cut a few things out. But they put the whole interview on the BBC television 9 o'clock news. But they got such a response. The good old British public were sending money to the BBC. And they were writing letters saying, here's 5 or 10 or 20 pounds to help Eddie on his way to Calgary, because they knew I had no money at all. And the BBC were collecting thousands of pounds for me. And because they got such a response, and because the Olympics were in Canada, in Calgary, they sent this interview, this TV interview, over to Canadian television. So these group of supporters from an oil company saw on Canadian television this news item, Eddie Edwards, Britain's first ever ski jumper, is coming to the Calgary Winter Olympics. And they christened me Eddie the Eagle. So then 2 weeks later, I flew into Calgary for the Olympic Games. I was very excited. Who wouldn't be? This is the Olympics. And I went through passport control at the airport, and I went to the baggage carousel to pick up my skis and boots and bags and put them on my trolley. And I had journalists trying to ask me questions. I had TV cameras pointing at me as we were walking through the airport. And right in the middle of Calgary Airport, there was a great big banner on the wall, and it said, "Welcome to Calgary, Eddie the Eagle." And I walked past this banner and I looked up and I said, wow. I said, who's that? And they said, it's you. And that was it. That was the very first time that I realised that I'd been christened Eddie the Eagle. Mind you, over the last 36 years, I have been called a lot of other things, but I'm very proud of the name Eddie the Eagle. And I think till the day I die, I will always be known as Eddie the Eagle. So how did I get into ski jumping? Because a lot of people think that I just grabbed a pair of skis a week before Calgary, rushed over to Canada, learnt to ski jump, and then took part in the Olympic Games. And I can understand why people think like that. The fact that I came 58th probably had a lot to do with it. But I started ski jumping 22 months before Calgary. But when you consider that all the other ski jumpers there have been jumping for 25 years, and I'd been jumping for 22 months. So I was very much a beginner when I went to the Calgary Winter Olympics. And I started on a school ski trip when I was 13. I loved my skiing. I got into ski racing, doing slalom, giant slalom. I got my international race license to race for Great Britain in slalom, giant slalom, and Super G. And that's where my history comes from, alpine ski racing. But trying to race in Europe was very, very expensive. And I had the bright idea to save up some money and go to America, because I thought the cost of living would be cheaper in America and it would be easier for me to carry on my ski racing. And I went to a place called Lake Placid in upstate New York. And Lake Placid were the hosts of the 1980 Winter Olympics. And because of that, Lake Placid was very, very expensive. And I didn't realise that until I got there. And I ran out of money very, very quickly. So then I had this big decision to make. Do I pack my bags and fly back to the UK and go back to plastering with me dad and forget about skiing because it's just too expensive? Or shall I try and find something cheaper to do? And I saw the ski jumps. I'd never seen a proper ski jump before. I didn't realise how humongously big these ski jumps were. But when I sat and looked at them, I very quickly realised that Great Britain have had lots of alpine skiers. We've had lots of cross-country skiers. And we've even had quite a few biathlon skiers, the cross-country and the shooting. But we've never had a ski jumper. And I thought, there's a gap in the market. Yeah. I should have gone on Dragon's Den or something. And I thought, there's a gap in the market, I'll see what I can do with ski jumping. So that's where I started. Now, I don't know if you've seen the film, Eddie the Eagle, that was released in 2016. Now, you probably wouldn't have realised if you've seen the film, it was on TV quite recently, and I don't think you would have probably realised that in the film, they pretended that I learnt to ski jump in a place called Garmisch-Partenkirchen in Germany. Now, I did train there, and I did compete in competitions there, but I didn't learn to ski jump there. I learnt in Lake Placid in upstate New York, but the rest of the film is pretty much spot on, especially the way in which I did it. I started on the very, very small jumps and worked my way very quickly up to the big ski jumps. Now, in Lake Placid, the smallest ski jumps they had was a 10 metre, a 15 metre, and a 40 metre ski jump. Now, normally, that takes about 5 years to master those 3 jumps. But I did those 3 jumps in one afternoon. Yes. Did a bit of a crash course. And I wanted to move up to the 90 metre, the big boy, but they wouldn't let me. And I stayed on that 40 metre for a month, and then my visa ran out, and I had to come back to the UK. But before I left, the people in Lake Placid gave me the address of a ski jump centre in a place called Kandersteg, which is a tiny little village in Switzerland. So I borrowed my mum's car and I drove to Switzerland. Now, when I arrived in Kandersteg, my first problem was I had nowhere to stay. And Switzerland is mega expensive. And I couldn't afford the hotels and B&Bs in the village. But one of the hoteliers said, if you go to the end of the village, there's an international scout centre. It's a very cheap place to stay. And I stayed at the scout centre. They let me stay there. And they charged me £1 a night to stay at this scout centre. Now, this scout centre was where cubs, scouts and Girl Guides from all over the world would go there for a bit of a holiday and do their mountaineering, cooking, hiking badges, that kind of thing. Now, as I say, they charged me £1 a night to stay there. Now, I could just about afford £1 a night, but I couldn't afford food as well as £1 a night to stay there. But I got to a very good system, because I very quickly realised that the cubs and the scouts and the Girl Guides would sit around their campfire eating their breakfast, their lunch, and in the evening eating their tea. And when this was going on, I would sneak outside and hide in the bushes. I know it sounds pervy, I know, but it really wasn't. And I'd be hiding there, and the cubs and the scouts would finish their food, they'd put all the leftovers in the bin, and they'd go off and play or do their chores. I would sneak out of the bushes, I would go to the bin, I would scrape the food out of the bin, I would take it back to one of the 5 kitchens that they had scattered around the campsite, and then I'd start separating the food, the meat, the potatoes, the vegetables. Now, separating gravy and custard was a bit difficult, but not very necessary, because custard-flavoured gravy is delicious, especially when you're starving. And I'd separate the foods, reheat it on the hob, and then I used to eat it. Now, I didn't have to do that every single meal, because the scout groups were really kind, and they would invite me for breakfast, lunch or tea, or before they went home, they would give me their spare food. But when my stocks got a little bit low, I then had to resort once again to scraping food out of bins, reheating it and eating it. So that's how I survived. But it was what was happening on the ski jump that was the most important thing. And they didn't put this episode that happened to me in Kandersteg in the film. Now, the ski jump centre in Kandersteg comprised of 3 jumps, a 30 metre, a 60 metre, and a 90 metre. So we're getting up to the big jumps now. And I was using very old ski jumping equipment that I found in a lost property shed in Lake Placid. Now, this old equipment was a very old pair of jump skis, a very old jumpsuit, and I had this old helmet. And this helmet was so old, it didn't have a buckle to tie it on with. And I used to tie it on with a piece of string. Now, that was okay when I was jumping on the 30 metre, the little hill. And it was okay when I moved up to the 60 metre, the middle hill. But I started having problems when I moved up to the 90 metre, the big hill. Because I was on the 90 metre one day, and it was my turn to go. I was sat there at the top of the jump. I was 280 feet at the top of this jump. What's that, about 28 floors? I was sat there. I started coming down the jump, picking up speed. I got up to 70 miles an hour, and then I came to the takeoff, and I put so much force and power into that takeoff that the string on my helmet snapped. And as I was flying through the air, my helmet fell off. And you know, it was the biggest mistake of my life. I really should have held on to that helmet, because I jumped 37 metres, but my helmet jumped 98. Yes. I must be one of the only ski jumpers in history to be beaten even by his own helmet. And this happened not just once, but 3 or 4 jumps consecutively. And when this was happening, I was jumping alongside the Italian national jumping squad, and one of the young jumpers came over to me and they said, "Eddie, please, you can't keep jumping with this old helmet. It's far too dangerous. Why don't you have this?" And they gave me almost a brand new helmet and goggles, and it was wonderful. A pair of goggles that I could actually see out of. A proper helmet with a proper buckle, and it stayed on my head, and it gave me the confidence to jump just that little bit better. And then a few weeks later, the Austrian national jumping squad, they came to Candlestick and they saw me jumping with these old jump skis, and they said, "Eddie, they are rubbish. Why don't you have these?" And they gave me almost a brand new pair of jumping skis. I put them on and I jumped even better still. And then a few weeks later, the West German team came along and they saw me jumping with this old jumping suit. And they said, "Eddie, throw it away, it's rubbish. Why don't you have this?" And they gave me almost a brand new jumping suit. Admittedly, it was in German colours, but I'm not proud. I put it on and I jumped even better still. And then a few weeks later, the French national team, they came along and they gave me some wax. And I went, "Oh, thanks." And then a few weeks later, the Swiss national team, they came along and they showed me how to use that wax to wax my skis. And then gave me some coaching. And then I thought, instead of jumping for Great Britain, I should jump for the EU. Because without all that help from all those different teams, I would not have been able to make it to Calgary, to the Olympic Games, which were only about a year to 15 months away. And not only did they give me all this equipment, but they stayed in all the nice hotels in the village. So when they went for lunch, they used to come back to ski jump in the afternoon, and they used to bring me ham rolls, cheese rolls, bananas. So they even used to feed me as well. So I thank my lucky stars, they helped me as much as they did. And it was while I was in Candlestick in the summer of 1986 and 1987 that I got a new British ski jump record. And from getting that record, I was given a license to represent Great Britain in the European Cup and then hopefully qualify for the World Cup, the World Championships and the Olympic Games. So I was one step closer to realising my dream of getting to an Olympic Games. And I did my very first European Cup competition on Boxing Day 1986 in St. Moritz in Switzerland. And it was there that I realised how painful ski jumping can be. I landed very heavily one day on the 90 metre, and St. Moritz is a very high flying hill. You fly very high off the ground. And I came down quite heavily. And one of my leather boots, my ski jumping boots, one of my leather boots split. And as I landed, I fell back and I twisted. And as you can see with the video, I used to have a big bottom jaw. So the first thing that hit the concrete like snow on the landing hill was my bottom jaw. And I broke it in 2 places. Now, I couldn't go to the hospital. I had no money. I had no insurance. It would have cost me a fortune. So I went back to the hostel where I was staying. I grabbed a pillowcase. I wrapped it around my face just to hold my jaw in place. And I carried on ski jumping because I was determined to do my very first European Cup with or without a broken jaw. And I finally did it. And then a week later, I did my first World Cup. And then eventually, I qualified for Calgary, and it was amazing taking part at the Calgary Winter Olympics. And I think there were 3 or 4 very important reasons why I became so popular at Calgary. I think the first reason was because I was always exemplifying that Olympic ideal. I was this tiny little David of a country against these Goliath nations of ski jumping. I came from a country with no snow. I had no ski jump. I had no money, no trainer, no equipment. And yet here I was competing with some of the best ski jumpers in the world. So I was exemplifying that Olympic ideal. A second reason was always because I was laughing and joking and having fun. And I didn't think there was anything wrong in having a smile on my face when I was doing something that I just love to do, because I'm just as excited to go skiing or ski jumping now as when I first started over 46 years ago. And then there was a third reason. It was my dream to get to those Olympic Games, and I made my dream come true. And if I inspired anybody back then, 36 years ago, or with the movie that they released 8 years ago, that if you have a goal, a dream, an ambition, you hold on to that, and who knows, it might just come true. And then, of course, there was a fourth reason, and probably the most important reason of the lot, as to why I became so popular at Calgary. I was the best-looking athlete there. Now, jumping at Calgary was wonderful, but having a movie made about my life was not on my radar at all. And then, of course, they made Cool Runnings. I don't know if you've seen Cool Runnings. That's a brilliant film. Yes, most of you have. It was made by Disney in the early 1990s with John Candy as the team manager. And of course, it was about the Jamaican bobsled team. And that was the same Olympics, Calgary 1988. And I thought, well, they'll never make another film about the same Olympics. But then I was approached 25 years ago to make a film about my life. And I was very excited back then. I thought, oh my God, they're going to make a film. And I signed this deal to this very small production company. And this company had to raise the $5 million that it was going to cost 25 years ago to make the film. They were trying to find a director to direct the film. And they were trying to find somebody to play me in the movie. Now, 25 years ago, they were looking at Robbie Williams from Take That. Yeah, he was going to give up singing, give up Take That, and become an actor. I'm so glad that fell through, so glad. I mean, I did like Take That back then. I thought they were brilliant. I loved their songs, but I didn't think he would be a very good actor to play me in a movie. Then they were looking at Rupert Grint, Ron Weasley in the Harry Potter films, the red-headed guy. Now, I thought he would have been very good, but that fell through. Then they were looking at Ewan McGregor. That fell through. Simon Pegg, I thought he would have been brilliant, but that fell through. Even Steve Coogan, who I thought was a bit old, really. I'm glad that fell through. And in the end, I said, look, just give me a call when you actually start making the film. And after 5 and then 10 years, I thought, well, the film will never be made. But then I did a TV show called Splash about 9 years ago, and I won the first series. And Dexter Fletcher saw me perform and win that first series. And he thought to himself, there must be a story there. And then he realised, or he heard, that I signed these movie rights some 15 years beforehand. So together with Matthew Vaughn, they bought the rights, and then they started making the film. So just before I wrap things up, for those of you who haven't seen the film, I'd love to show you the trailer. Let's take a look.
As we embark on a new era for sport, it's an opportunity to discover a new kind of athlete.
Okay, hands up, that was my fault. for as long as I can remember.
Champion!
It has been my ambition to become an Olympian.
Eddie, you are not an athlete!
You're right. I'm never going to go to the Olympics. I'm going to go to the Winter Olympics.
You will never be Olympic material.
Let's do it.
I really need a coach.
You do realize the time to start jumping is when you're 5 or 6.
What would you know about it anyway?
Bronson Peary, 1968 champion.
How come I've never heard of him?
They kicked him out.
He was disrespectful of the sport. Just after a few tips.
Give up. There's one for free.
Could you give me a push, please? A push? He's a lot higher than I expected it to. Don't bend your leg.
You're not going to give up, are you?
I'm gonna do it. I was kicked off every team I was ever on before I even got a chance to prove myself. That's why I need my own moment.
It's a world that doesn't want to know you.
So what's new?
I know what it's like to be written off. I can get you a moment. It's going to hurt like hell.
We have no desire to be associated with ludicrous antics
I think a little bit of weed came out.
and defeat.
You're a disgrace to the sport.
Really?
Personal best! And we're a disgrace! I love proving people wrong. I have to do this.
You got more spirit than any of those other jumpers out there.
Here he comes, Britain's Eddie Edwards.
You're Eddie the Eagle.
Just fly.
Eddie's off. Can he pull off the impossible?
Yes. Thank you, thank you. I love that trailer and I love the film. It was Eddie the Eagle, the movie, was released in 2016. And over the last 8 years, I've seen the film 158 times. Yeah, and it still makes me cry when I watch it because they did such a great job. They really captured the heart and spirit and essence of my story. And they did it in such a lovely way. And I couldn't believe how much Taron Egerton looked and sounded and acted just like I was all those years ago. And to have Hugh Jackman as my coach was amazing. He was such a lovely guy. And he's like an amalgamation of probably half my coaches. I had about 22, 23 different coaches, and they couldn't put all the coaches in the film, so they took characteristics from most of them and put them into the one character. So Hugh Jackman's like an amalgamation of half my coaches, but he did a wonderful job. And in the trailer there, and in the film, there's a press conference where I say there's nothing I like better than proving people wrong. Because when I was that 13-year-old boy and I started skiing for the very first time and I fell in love with the sport, I told all my family and friends that I wanted to go to the Winter Olympics. And they just laughed. They said it's impossible, it can't be done. But the more that people told me that I couldn't do something, and I was told all the way through those 11 years, from when I started skiing to eventually when I got to Calgary, everybody kept saying, it can't be done, it's impossible. But the more that people told me that I couldn't do something, the more that inspired me to prove them wrong. And I proved everybody wrong by getting to those Olympic Games in Calgary. And the biggest tools in my tool bag was resilience and tenacity and determination. And I absolutely refused to give up. And I'm sure you guys have had many, many challenges over the last 15 and 20 years, and you will continue to have many more challenges in the future over the next 15, 20 years. But with bags of resilience, tenacity and determination, you can overcome anything. Thank you very much for listening to me.